Folks, if you will, we will get started. We have a number of people. We have 38 people who are on presently, and we will probably get a few more. As you may know, this session is being recorded, so we will be able to see this later, and other people who have registered will be able to see this registering as well. Today is the Saturday sharing. We're going to be speaking about Royalties for Spirituals, a follow-up from our session from 2 years ago, just to bring people up to date as to what our programs are, how they're doing, and share some insights that we have from working through this program for the past 2 years to hopefully give some of you some ideas about how you might be able to become a part of this effort in your own area. I'm very happy today to have a few people joining me as a panelist on here. One is Susan DeSelms, who is the Minister of Music at the United Parish in Brookline, Massachusetts, and she was one of the people originally interviewed by NPR about the concept for Royalties for Spirituals. Another person is Adam Waite, who happens to be the Minister of Music at Montview Boulevard Presbyterian Church in Denver, Colorado. Also, he was on the interview on NPR. Kimberly Kersey is the Executive Director of the Artist Collective in Hartford, Connecticut. Kimberly is the person and the organization that we have collaborated with here at our church, and we'll be having her speak about her program and how the collaboration works and how we might be able to further that along. Also with us is the Reverend Fred Ward, who is the senior pastor at my church, the First Church of Hartford in First Church in West Hartford, and he will be speaking a little bit about our journey through this process as well. And I'm the Director of Worship Arts at First Church in West Hartford and a national board member of the UCCMA. Also on the call today and handling the technical things are Ed Clark and Joe Pritchard. We will be having question and answer period at the end of this, but I do encourage you to, if you have a question and you want to jot it down before you forget it, you can put it in the chat, and then we will be able to take part and bring that forward. So the first thing I would like to do is introduce again Susan DeSelms. And if she would, I would like to have her the opportunity to explain a little bit about how this idea came about and what the benefits and what her experience has been with this. Susan, would you join us?
Sure. So during COVID, 2020, and we all were there for the George Floyd awfulness that just highlighted the history of violence and just kind of brought it into focus for a whole lot of people. At that time, we were all online, and so I had opted to play some recordings that I had made a number of years ago on a Good Friday. That were improvisations on Negro spirituals. And one of our congregation members kind of protested that it was a tokenistic event or a choice, and could I have chosen something else? And it just kind of brought for all of the kind of the fraught feelings about using Negro spirituals in a primarily white, or at least not African American church. And so it made me think, and I just kept it. It's always been obviously an issue. It's something we've all kind of danced around. Knowing this music is so it's beloved, and it's part of so many of our backgrounds. But it's and for that reason, and it's cherished. But so you don't want to let it go. But at the same time, it has very complex feelings around, for good reasons, about how we use them and why we use them, and if that's even a respectful thing to do. And it dawned on me as I was getting out my CCLI license, agreement to sign again for the next year, and that there are spirituals published in our hymnals that there's no composers getting royalties for those, and that, whereas everybody else would be, right? Or at least somebody's ancestors would have been getting something. So, but in those cases, no, it's purely public domain music at this point, and it's even called folk music, American folk music, which isn't, kind of another sort of a total misnomer. But so that was kind of where the light bulb kind of came on, and I started to kind of try to figure out how we could possibly do that. And I started to talk to a lot of people and about, how would this land? What if we created a royalties program? And what if that became like a way to, just kind of at least address this one thing that has become so synonymous with American culture, that that at least the church is doing the right thing by it, and that there, this lack of generational wealth, this is something, this is money, and lots of people, lots of money. It seemed like a very potential, had a lot of potential. And again, talked to a lot of people of color, as many as I could, and started to look for donor organizations, or organizations that we could pay royalties to, and came across Hamilton Garrett. Once I came across Hamilton Garrett and their mission statement, Hamilton Garrett Music and Arts is an after-school program for kids in Roxbury, and they've been there for a very long time. They're affiliated with Charles Street Methodist, I think it's Methodist Church, the historic Charles Street Church. Or they had been, and they'd had a relationship. It used to be in the church, and now they have their own building. And they part of their mission is to continue to teach Negro spirituals to the younger generations of people of color, kids of color, and kids that are musically inclined, especially. So these kids, it's almost free. They have, but limited resources. And so but their mission statement kind of told me everything that it would kind of really it would be very clear when I explained it to the congregation about what we were doing and why we were doing it and how this would work. And I happened to have a neighbor, Craig Lamolt, who worked for WGBH, and I kind of just yelled over the fence and said, "Hey, I think this is a good idea. We're about to launch it in 1 week, and I think it might be a good story." And he was all over it. And during the week, he got to the service, and then he just started interviewing everybody, and it became a thing. So yeah, that is the background. The church that Sunday, it was October, I believe, 31st, 2021. And that was the first Sunday. And I gave the message that day, and sang a lot of commonly known spirituals that people may not know to be Negro spirituals, and some that they know, and some that they don't. And that seemed to make a big impact, and it went over very, very well. People were very enthusiastic about it. Yeah, we haven't really had any issues with it since then. So that's the basic background. There's more obviously to the story, but I can keep it at that. And by the way, thanks, Jim, for hosting us today.
My pleasure. We'll be back to talk a little bit more about her experience and some of the other thoughts that we might be able to share with one another on it. But at this time, I'd like to bring in Adam Waite, who was coming up with a similar type of program with it in his church, and have him explain a little bit about his journey and how things are going.
Thanks, Jim. And this is a sign of getting older. When you said it's been 2 years since the last phone call, it's like, that can't possibly be. It's been 2 years. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Here we are. And it's great to have everyone here on the call today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to participate in what we feel is a very, very important endeavor, of course. There's a lot of similarities with my personal journey and Montview's journey here in Denver, Colorado, to what Susan just shared with you all. My experience, I guess, maybe started kind of in a little bit more of a personal, inward journey in the fact that after George Floyd's murder, but also I was especially if you remember the incident with the woman in Central Park around the dog walker, that one really kind of, even though it wasn't obviously nearly as tragic, that one kind of cut to me in an odd way, in that I started to wonder about what kind of latent racist tendencies were within me that I hadn't even realized or addressed. So that was kind of concurrent to our staff doing some anti-racism work through Next Church, which is a division of the PCUSA that really kind of pushes forward on social justice issues and such. And in essence, through kind of some of my own reflections, I was realizing that I was taking for granted the music from Black America, especially as it relates to jazz has been hugely influential in my musical development. And then, of course, you start to trace the lineage and you get into the spirituals, and spirituals are an important part of, I believe, an important part of the mainline Protestant worship experience, and certainly an important part of my understanding of the American mainline Protestant worship experience. And I just realized that I'd been taking it for granted. And so that, led me to the next step as far as, well, what can we do about that? What can we start to fix that within me? And then how can I start to address that within the area that I have the most influence, right? What I think sometimes we get caught up, I don't mean to say we all do, but some of us get caught up in trying to, like, how do we change the world? And sometimes it's just most important to, like, hey, how can we influence that community that we're most directly involved with, right? And so obviously I'm very directly involved and have a lot of influence over the musical community at Montview. And that idea of, just as Susan, that's a perfect story about her filling out the CCLI license. Like, oh yeah, we're paying money for this music, but we never paid money for this music. I had a very similar moment and realization about that, and was excited about the possibility of, obviously, to use a phrase, you're putting our money where our mouth is, but also the opportunity to really lift up the spirituals that would come from that, right? To know that, well, when you do this financial element, and if you make it a royalty payment, which means that you're bringing attention to it every single time you perform the spiritual in worship or sing the spiritual in worship as a hymn, congregational hymn, that it creates an opportunity not only for this financial contribution, but for this educational moment, right? To lift that spiritual up, to talk about it. Why is it an important part of our collective American history? Why is it an even more important part of Black America history? So I got really excited about this idea. And we are a large Presbyterian church, so I don't know if I have any other Presbyterians on the phone or on the call with us today, but there is the saying that the Presbyterians are the frozen chosen. So we're not exactly known for moving at a fast pace. And then, to further complicate matters, we're a large Presbyterian church, so it is a bit like, moving a cruise ship, as it were. And so this idea was happening at the same time as Susan was coming to her realizations, but we took a lot longer to implement because it was important for me to do it in the Presbyterian way, to let it sit in some committees, go through a discernment process. And so we had about a year-long discernment process before it was approved by our session, which is the governing body of the Presbyterian Church. And that was approved in the summer of 2022. And so then we began implementation in the fall of 2022. And what that looked like was kind of like let me see here if I can put this succinctly, maybe a two-pronged effort, in that we had an educational component. So we, throughout the year, we did adult education hours centered on the spirituals. And then whenever in worship that we would sing a spiritual, again, whether it be from our hymnal or a soloist or our choir singing the spiritual, we would make a contribution from our operating fund into a reparations royalty fund that we had set up, in which we would start to collect the money. And then in addition to that, we would have a little rubric printed in our bulletin every Sunday that said, today's presentation of insert spiritual name here, comma, an American Negro spiritual, is done in accordance with our reparations royalty pilot program. And then we would put a QR code in the bulletin and encourage the congregants to also make a one-time or however many times they'd like donation. So they could scan the QR code or type in the website address. They could also write a check and put onto the bottom, that they're making this donation. And so that way we are also encouraging active participation amongst the congregation to, do their own discernment, to think about this on their own as far as what kind of monetary contribution that they feel called to make. And so that pot of money then just started to build and build and build. Now, where we differ in our journey from Susan's journey is that we made the intentional choice to not pick a partnering organization at the beginning. We wanted to get into this and start to learn and do some of our own work internally before we started to go externally into the community and start to make connections. And that was a fascinating process to watch our committee, this would be our worship and music and the arts committee, go through this kind of transformative experience to think about, okay, we are not a grant organization in which we are soliciting applications. Like, there is, I don't know if it's a kind of blatant white supremacy thing, or if it's just, hey, we've got the money, you don't have the money, and we're so used to being in this position of prove yourself to us, write to us why you deserve the money, right? And so we flipped the script on that. We wanted to be very intentional about that. No, it is our job, right, to go out into the community and find, who we feel called to make this our first donation to, and to flip that kind of power element to it. I don't think nobody pushed back against it, but you could feel a certain bit of discomfort in that, and everyone worked through it, and that was great. It was wonderful to see folks do that with open hearts and open minds. And what it did is it created, folks were then calling up different organizations and saying, hey, can we take you out to coffee? We just love to talk about what you do. And the community building aspect was starting to happen, which was just a beautiful thing to see. And so now just recently, in the past couple of months, our committee did decide on a partnering organization, and we're making our first contribution to that organization, which is the Hope Center, which is here in Northeast Park Hill, predominantly African-American community. This is a school that's pre-K through 8th grade, and they just don't have the resources to start up a music program, and they've been wanting to do it for a long time. And it's just a lovely fit, and we're very excited because it's literally like 5 minutes down the road from us too. So it's in our neighborhood, and it's just a continuation of building out that community. I have other things to share too. I've already gone on way too long, but maybe in the Q&A section, I can talk about some of the other ways that this project, just kind of leads to another thing. It leads to another thing. It leads to another thing. It's kind of like the rabbit hole experience on YouTube, right? One video leads to another. That's how this project is. It's just a beautiful thing to see how, you just connect with different elements of your community, and it has been a very, very positive experience for us at Montview.
Thank you, Adam. We did have a question that came up in the chat. So if you wanted to be able to work on this while I go into my next portion of it here. They're asking for you to include the language that you used in your bulletin on Sundays and
Yeah,
just put it in the chat.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank
I
you.
have something similar also. So yeah, we do something like that too.
Great.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I do mine as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sounds like it's a theme that's going on here.
Yeah, yeah. And it's tricky to find the language sometimes too.
Yes. So let me explain a little bit about my journey and our church's journey through this space. Um, I happened to be on my way to church one morning, and I heard this session with Susan and Adam, and I was just, we were all struggling again at that time, uh, trying to do, okay, so anything that we in a white church did, it seemed like seemed very hollow. It didn't seem like it was something that it was just like lip service. It was nothing that was really consequential. And I always look for opportunities, especially with music, uh, that we can use it to be a more of a uniting factor, and to be able to see how we can share with others that some of the things that we have. And so I was just taken with this and said, yes, this is something that we could do too. It doesn't seem to be extremely difficult. And we were going through this situation as well. During that time, during COVID and after the George Floyd tragedy, um, there was a group in West Hartford called the Concerned Parents of Color. And they brought up a number of things to the West Hartford city council about names of places and schools and boulevards and things of that nature that had the names of slave owners as prominent, which made them feel uncomfortable, especially with their children in the area, that this person receives recognition even though they were a slaveholder. We did a deep dive as far as what this slavery type of environment was in New England, in Connecticut. I mean, it was still here. Everyone thinks it was just down south. It's not. It was up here as well. And we had one of the things that this group came forward with is the name of the green that is right in front of the church. That green happens to actually belong to the church. It was given as a parcel of land for which the church could be built on by a parishioner named Goodwin. And as it turns out, he had a number of slaves which assisted him on his farm. And because of that, he became very wealthy and prosperous. And so he was able to give this land to the church. And eventually the town, it runs right through the center of town, and both sides of South Main Street go across that piece of property. And it was known as the Goodwin Green. And so there was a significant effort with a number of different partnering organizations besides the Concerned Parents of Color in West Hartford to change that name. As it turns out, one of our parishioners is a direct descendant of the Goodwins. And so that also brought it quite home. She didn't realize the history behind it. And she felt that she was very disturbed about that. And she definitely wanted to have it. So we had a couple of different ideas with different groups and so forth. We came up as a collective with the name Unity Green. And that is the name of the green that is in front now. We had a service of dedication with this West Hartford councils, with the church participants, the members of the community that came forward with the issue, and they participated. And it is now known as Unity Green. So to us, that seems to be a success story of how partnering and listening and collaborating can actually work. And as we were doing our own history about what slavery was like in that period of time in the early colonial period, and some of the other things, we came across a very notable person who we think did come to West Hartford. He was brought up in West Hartford and may have attended our church. And I'm going to be turning that over to Reverend Fred Ward, our senior pastor, to give us a little bit more information about that.
Thanks, Jim. I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I think I just wanted to say as an opening comment that if there's a workable recipe for reparation or reconciliation, or as Adam said, changing the world, I think it's probably story. As simple as that sound, I think that's maybe the thread that I'm hearing this morning, and it's what I testify to. Jim was just talking about Unity Green, and the purpose there, as I read it on our website, was to inspire conversation, collaboration, contemplation, celebration of community by telling story. And so it's the story that's been muted, the story that's been neglected, the story that's been silenced. And so in bringing that story forward, we move closer to something like reconciliation and justice. So when I was studying the church, my first contact with First Church was in June of 2022. I came to be the Juneteenth speaker. And what was interesting to me is I didn't bring Juneteenth there as a person of color. It's a tradition that was already there. It was a pre-existing condition. And so that was just amazing to think that people of conscience actually, have impact on the world and on faith communities. So I came there on Juneteenth in June of 2022. Less than 6 months later, I was actually called to be the associate pastor there. And there's a story there too. I think the collision of who that community was and who I am and was as a minister and coming together, it's been amazing. And I've been so blessed. And 2 months into my tenure there, we dedicated, as Jim just mentioned, this Lemuel Haynes memorial that was in February of 2023. Lemuel Haynes, the first Black man in the United States to be ordained as a minister, who had, it seems to have been, according to history, born in West Hartford, had ties there. So we claim him in the best sense of that way, identify with him, celebrate him. And so that was just another amazing piece that something in the character of the church said, we want to tell the full story. We are about justice and social justice, and not just lip service, but real change. We have not only been, we have attention getting moments, but attention keeping, which I think is the main thing. And I think that's something to celebrate with this Royalties for Spiritual thing, is that it sustains our attention on an incredibly important and impactful conversation. So I think I'll pause there. Hopefully I covered some of what Jim was looking for me to cover. But I also just wanted to say, more than just events, I wanted to describe and celebrate the character of the church that I'm a part of and privileged to lead and serve. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Fred. So the full circle type of things, it's such a small world. One of the churches that Lemuel Haynes was a minister at was the first church in Torrington, Connecticut, First Congregational Church, Torrington, Connecticut, which also happens to be the home of a Boy Scout troop that I used to bring my sons to. I used to live in Torrington, and the church is still there. It's still active. It's quite active right now, and it just happens to be a few miles down the road from the birthplace of the abolitionist John Brown. So there's a big, huge tie, personal tie for me into this whole type of story as it is. And when we were looking for a group to partner with on this, we were very fortunate to have a group that is furthering the education of the African diaspora culture to youth in the Hartford area. I visited the Artist Collective in Hartford and was just blown away by the program and the wealth of culture that is in that space. And I'm so pleased to have Kimberly Kersey, who is the executive director of that organization, to speak about what that organization does and how programs such as this might be able to help her. Kimberly.
Thank you for that. The Artist Collective has been offering music and dance in the North End of Hartford since 1970. And if you know the North End of Hartford, it's a predominantly Black and Brown community. It was founded by jazz legend Jackie McLean. And it was founded both as a place to study music and dance, but also, and importantly, as a place to foster African-American pride in culture and history for our next generation of young people. So we offer tap, jazz, hip hop, praise dance, martial arts, music instruction in saxophone, piano, drums, vocal lessons. It really runs the range for our students, starting at age 3 up to adult. And we offer that after school program, which I heard Susan mention about the organization you're connected to. The after school programs are so important, particularly in communities like this. So we offer a safe space for kids to come directly after school. They can start their homework, and then they start dance and music lessons at 4 o'clock, and we keep the students until about 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And then we also have a Saturday program for students who might just want to take one-off classes. And that's actually happening now. We offer dance and music starting at 9 a.m. till about 2:30 on Saturday afternoons. So we open our space, and we have this beautiful space right on the corner of Albany and Woodland in the North End of Hartford. Our space is open, you know, as a dance and music school and academy, and after school place, but also as a real community anchor. In a community like this, there aren't a lot of large spaces to hold life events, sweet 16s, repasses when there's a funeral, retirement parties, weddings. All kinds of things happen here in the walls of the Artist Collective. And it's our pleasure to be able to bring the community together in ways like that. And we open up the doors to the dance school, to the performing school at the end of each semester, you know, both in the at the end of the fall semester and also the spring semester, for our students to be able to showcase what they've learned, and then also to do a bit of cultural exposure for the community, to be able to see what an African-American based arts institution looks like. And it's a great way to bring the wider community together. So for example, in December, we had a really wonderful Kwanzaa celebration, a pre-Kwanzaa celebration right before the holiday. And we had performances, we had an educator come in and talk about the principles of Kwanzaa. We had a vendor market with over 20 vendors selling, Black vendors selling African-American culturally based goods for the holidays. And we had about 200 members of the community come through our doors that day to share that day with us. Just last weekend, we celebrated Black History Month as a community, and we had a community masterclass in African dance. That was incredibly fun. Our students participated. We also had an opportunity to invite 50 members of the public to come in and take the class alongside of our students. I did a little bit of dancing. I'm not a dancer, so it was really a fun, exciting, and dynamic day. And we're looking to do more things like that. Actually, right now, in the studio just above me, so if you hear any strange bangs and squeals and music playing, our students are taking a different master class. We brought in a professional dancer named Lauren Horn. And it gives me great pride to say that she's a professional dancer. She's an alum of the Artist Collective, took classes here as a child, went on to study dance, and is out in the world now touring and doing amazing things. She approached me and said she'd like to give back, and we set up this opportunity for her to come and do a master class with our students in modern expressive jazz. So I can tell they're having a ball up there. When we're done here on the Zoom, I'm going to scoot upstairs and peek in the window and see what they're up to. But it's things like that. It's things like, you know, the cultural celebrations on the holidays. It's the master classes. Those are the kinds of things that this relationship with the First Church of West Hartford's allowed us to do. This Royalties for Spiritual program, you know, the funds that we've received, I've made a point of directly sewing that right back into our students, whether it's paying for that dance instructor upstairs. Quite frankly, when she approached me, she said she wanted to give back and volunteer her time to do the master class. I feel it's important that artists get paid for their time. And it gives me, thank you, Marcia. It's important to pay them for their time. And so she doesn't know it yet, but I'll be giving her a check for her time today. And it's the funds coming from programs like this that allow us to do the little extras that make the students' time here at the collective special. So I want to just thank you. I want to thank the First Church, and I can't talk highly enough about how appreciative we are that we were the chosen entity for your efforts. And I just really commend all of you for having this very brave talk about reparations. It's not an easy one, but I really commend you for taking this topic on and having an open dialogue about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. One of the things that we did together as a group is as she said, she has a number of these groups there that train through the year. And then they came to our church and they put on the performance of their talents and of their work for our congregation. And it was a tremendous event. And we hope to have another one of those again soon, because it creates greater awareness and partnership with our neighbors just down the street. So it's a wonderful collaboration, and we look forward to doing that. Just wanted to talk a little bit about what to do. You know, we've been doing this for, in our case, a couple of years now, and there can be kind of a burnout type of thing, depending on how often it's done, and so forth and so on. I will suggest that we don't, we kind of be judicious about how often we include it, but it's obviously at some momentous occasions. For example, we used "Go Tell It on the Mountain" as a response during Epiphany, and we brought up the fact that that was a spiritual, and that we made a mention and a connection again to the Royalties of Spirituals project, and that just happened this past week. I know of other churches who've had celebrations that they've orchestrated specifically for an event, and they used it they conducted donations that way. I've been contacted by schools, colleges, and independent choirs about how to go about doing something like this, and how do we did it. So it is gathering interest in areas outside of this as well. So I'd be interested in hearing some of our others who are on the call, what they might be having as an opportunity, or how they do it, or how frequently do they do it, or some parameters around that.
I can share if you want to. So I felt like it was important to kind of make a commitment to Hamilton Garrett about how much they could expect from us each year. So that was, so it seemed as though having a regular rhythm and kind of like a kind of a constant sort of like, just not as randomized, but like at least like once a month, that there would be some, some opportunity to elevate the project and use the spiritual. And sometimes there's more, sometimes we can, and during Black History Month, for instance, we've been using spirituals every week, and raising extra funds to buy the African American Heritage Hymnal for the pews. But so I think making a commitment is important. I think to, again, reduce sort of like the burnout, as you say. I think having at least some of the funds budgeted, so that you're not constantly knocking on the door asking for money, because that gets tiring to people, and also not everybody brings cash. So you have, or has a way to just do these kind of like spontaneous donations. So we felt like it was important to have like a have at least half the money budgeted, and then half the money, or work towards having the plate offering kind of fulfill that amount. And we're doing pretty good with our goals so far. Does that answer the question? I think.
I can share too that very similar in the fact that we want to make it just a regular part of our worship experience and our kind of congregational life. Just like to Susan's earlier illustration about doing the CCLI license, it's just what you do. And of course, there are times when you go, oh, I wish I didn't have to write the check to the CCLI and do the license. Well, of course, there's going to be that kind of slightly nagging factor about the reparations royalty pilot program on occasion, but that's also kind of the point, right? Is that it's a constant reminder to you of how important this music is. I will say that we set out with this idea of we don't necessarily have to go out of our way to program more spirituals because they're already a big part of our mainline Protestant worship. And if anyone opens up your hymnal, right, and I would assume this is the same with the UCC and many other denominations, but certainly in the Presbyterian hymnal, Glory to God, in the index of authors, composers in the back of your hymnal, well, the one that has the greatest number of attributions, right, are the African American spirituals, the Negro spirituals. There's, in the Presbyterian hymnal, there's probably 30 or 35 spirituals in our hymnal. So you don't have to, it's already part of us. You don't have to necessarily, I don't think, take the extra step to go and make it a part of your worship service. I believe I believe it already is kind of part of the worship service. Having said that, this reparations royalty project and the increased attention that we put on the spirituals because of it has had this interesting effect where now we are programming more spirituals because there is just a greater interest. So that's been a really lovely outcome of it. And the interest is done with intentionality and integrity, right? I think that's the really important thing. You'll never be able to do it authentically, right? Because the spiritual, for a myriad of reasons, one of which we're a predominantly white congregation. That's probably the number one. But the second of which is the minute the spiritual was written down on a piece of paper, right, it became less authentic, right? So I think it's important to not get wrapped up into the authenticity question when you're thinking about how do we best present the spiritual, but think of it more from a standpoint of integrity, right? How do we bring integrity to this presentation of the spiritual and intentionality, and do it with humility and understanding that we're learning and we will never master this, right? We're on this journey to learn. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but they felt somewhat connected.
Can I speak?
Yes, please do.
I'm Dr. Marcia Kendall Smith. I'm not a church musician. I'm just a musician. I have some random ideas or thoughts. I was the president of the National Association for the Study and Performance of African American Music. Long history I won't get into right now, but when I first heard about this, it was in 21. I told my organization, and it's a Black organization, and they were all interested. They hadn't heard of it, and most of them go to Black churches. Most of them happen to live in the South, who are the board members. And so they, of course, don't have to do this because it's inherent. This is what they do all the time in their churches, and they're always giving to organizations. We don't call it reparations. But I applaud all of you who are doing this, and all of your stories are so interesting. I just wish that somehow it could be in a pamphlet and distributed more, or put in a journal more, so that more people could have access to it. In 2013, I was living in Wisconsin, teaching at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, and the UMC foundation, a state foundation. I got a grant from them how to teach spirituals during worship services because they were concerned that the churches were not singing spirituals enough. And the workshop was very successful with numerous ministers and ministers of music who came from about 70 or so different congregations. I belong to a First Congregational Church in Sarasota, and our minister of music is on this call, and I have to publicly applaud him because when I first started there attending over 10 years ago, although there are all these spirituals in the hymnal, they were not sung as much as many of the Black members would always come to me. Can you get them to sing more spirituals? Well, there has been such a tremendous growth that happened because of different dynamics that came together. We're fortunate enough to have an artist in residence where there's funding to bring in an expert to deal with to teach the choir specific types of music. And a couple of times we've had people to teach about Keith Hampton recently, gospel music, about spirituals. And the more that happens, the more the choir learns it. And the more that we sing spirituals, not just in Black History Month, but throughout the year. And that's the way I think it should be. I'm getting off tangent. I just happened to think of something else. Many of you are saying Negro spirituals. Of course, that's the way that they were documented and when they were first written. And but I have always taught, I taught this as well, that it's redundant. A spiritual is African American. You don't have to say Negro spiritual, although you see that it's written on the page, but that's what it is. It's the religious music of Black Americans. I'm preparing a session right now for Wednesday for an AAUW chapter who asked me to give in 1 hour the history of African American music. So I'm all immersed in this. I'm sure many of you are, you can't see it, aware of the Slave Songs of the United States, which as far as I know is the first classic anthology of a collection of slave songs. Many of you mentioned your hymnals, and the African American hymnal, that thick one, which is very good, the GIA. But another one that I've seen in several churches that I've traveled around is Songs of Zion. And this has many spirituals as well as some gospel songs. And of course, you know, there is a difference. And I'm always teaching that difference too. But getting back to my church, the thing that I've taken from what all of you have said is that you've taken advantage of your communities, and they're all different. Your churches are different, and that's what's so wonderful, that we all, there's no blueprint that for us to follow. We just have to listen and learn from each other. Although our church does not have reparations for spirituals, I doubt if you could find any white church that doesn't sing and understand spirituals and gospels as much as our church. You should just hear them. The last time we sang, I can't even remember which song it was, our minister said, we all know this, so just close the hymnals and let's just sing it. And we sing it. And the whole congregation just joining in. And I think it was a cappella. Greg, maybe you remember what the name of the spiritual was. I don't remember. One other thing that we do as a church is we're closely connected with ASALH. That's the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. The largest chapter of that is in our community, Sarasota, Manatee, 2 counties. And in fact, the current president is also a member of our church. So he frequently gives messages about what's going on in the greater community. And they started a freedom school a year ago when our distinguished governor was banning African-American AP courses in the state, book banning and saying that slavery was beneficial to Black people. And so they started a freedom school with grants where the students meet for about 4 or 5 hours on 3 hours or so on Saturday. And it was very, very successful. So they started it the second year this time. And I will be giving a session soon about spirituals. I couldn't believe it. Maybe I'm ashamed to announce this, but the first year they were using a text. I can't remember who it was.
Marcia, excuse me, Marcia, I do want to get some other people because I've had some people who've had something and I want to get the chance to get to them today.
Thank you. All right.
I know Bill Wood, you had your hand up for a while, and I'd like to see if you had something that you wanted to share.
Sandy and I, my wife, we are co-chairs of the music committee for Newman Congregational Church, UCC, in Rumford, Rhode Island. The church currently has had for probably 4 or 5 years now a scholarship program, racial equity scholarship available for BIPOC students. And we were thinking of funding that, or partially funding it, with the singing of spirituals in choir, through the choir or through the congregation. But we were trying to figure out how do we gather the money for it. And one of the ideas we came up with was to put in the bulletin, the worship bulletin, a donation envelope. My question is, does any a better way? I like the idea of the QR code. However, a lot of our people won't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we do it at our church. We do it both ways. We allow people to. There are envelopes that they can use for royalties for spirituals or other specific donations that we have for other Sundays during the course of the year. They also can give directly online through our website. And we do have a program called Text to Give, so that you just send a message to give to a specific phone number, and it will reply back and give you the opportunity to select royalties for spiritual as your donation.
Yeah. Your
But
envelope, is there a particular envelope that you use?
No, we just, it's a generic envelope that we leave with a blank line at the bottom. So that envelope can be used for other community charities or something later on too.
Okay, thank you, James.
Ingrid, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a brief comment that I think it was Susan who talked about including the funds for this in the as a budget line item, partly to help against burnout. But I wanted to say that I think it's important for a couple of reasons to do that. We typically have a line item in our church budgets for other royalties, which are usually for white composers. And that, to me, having something in an operating budget kind of shows that it's an ongoing commitment, that it's something that the church has committed to covering. While donations are great and you could potentially bring in a higher amount of money that way, but that's something that might come and go and might go away. So it feels a little bit more like a temporary thing and less of an ongoing commitment. So I feel like it's important to have both and to not have the actual operating budget line item go away.
Thank you. Susan, you had your hand up there.
Yeah, well, Marcia raised I think something that I've been thinking about a lot, and it's the use of the word Negro as a descriptor for spirituals, and that has been a word that I have never gotten comfortable with, and we deferred completely to Hamilton Garrett as our partner organization to use the language that they preferred, and she felt Jeremy Gruber felt it was very important to keep the Negro part of it as a reminder of of basically where it comes from. And I like, yes, we should all know, but we don't necessarily all know. And her feeling was very strong that this is what they are, and don't take that it's not for you to decide how we call them, basically. And that was a good point. And also it's never ceased to be uncomfortable. But I still have a lot of discomfort hearing why people say Negro, period. And I mean, anybody's, it's still, so I kind of bring that as my question. And I also just wanted to second, where did she go? The woman who was just talking, but yes, I think the budgeted funds are really important too, because it's not even just that it's important, but it's also that everybody is a part of it. It's not just the people who bring their $20 bill, that day. So I would love to hear how other people feel about that particular, or what they've heard, or the issue of verbiage.
I think there's a lot of research out there and different academic. You can obviously a Google search, and I'm sure Susan you've done this, and it yields a bunch of different articles about what it should be, what the spiritual should be called. I can just share personally that we felt this is a very similar reason, that it was a descriptor. Right, it helped our predominantly white congregation truly understand where this music came from. Because to Marcia's point, yeah, I mean, it's kind of incredible, the lack of knowledge, and it's not ill-intentioned. It's just the way it is. Folks, come up and say, "Oh, I love that spiritual, Precious Lord, Take My Hand." Well, that's not a spiritual, right? And and oh, you mean Tommy Dorsey, the big band composer, didn't write Precious Lord, Take My Hand? It's like, oh, we got a lot of work to do, friends. We've got a lot of work to do. And so, yeah, the dividing line between the spirituals and gospel, right? What is that? So we've kept it in as a descriptor, but I've also certainly read a lot of academic articles and such to suggest the interchangeability of it. That Marcia for exactly the reasons Marcia was saying, that they're just the spirituals. And I think this is just a great example of the journey that we're on, that to not let, to kind of lean in sometimes to our discomforts, right? That to not let our concern about doing everything right prohibit us from taking that first step or that second step. Just as long as you're going forward with a open heart and mind and humility, and understanding that I don't know it all, and that I still have stuff to learn from my community and from the greater community, to just start taking those steps forward, and realize that you're going to make some mistakes along the way, and that's okay. If I could, James, before I just want to share one last thing that I may have I can't remember when this came online, if it was available 2 years ago when we had this call, but Brian Henn at the Center for Congregational Song got a hold of this idea as well, and he and I collaborated on a website that's available as a discernment tool for a congregation going through this process, trying to figure out if this is something they want to do. And Brian really did the bulk of the work on putting this website together, and he did a wonderful job. And he actually expanded it to a reparations royalty program for music from all persons of color, to allow that. We're obviously very focused on spirituals right now, as well we should be, but kind of allowing the space to understand, well, a congregation might be called to focus on a different area, and he allowed that in his discernment tool. I'm just going to paste that into the chat real quick in case folks find that helpful, especially if you're at the beginning end of this process.
Yes, I thank you very much, Adam. And one of the other things I just wanted to, again, point of direction to is that on the UCCMA.org website, we do have a number of other resources that are available. Before we wrap up, Kimberly, I was just wondering, is there a network or is there other organizations out there that you might be able to share something with, or where can people look for organizations that might be local to them?
That's a great question.
Mm.
There is a conglomerate of African American performing arts organizations. I have not identified one that's specifically around performing arts schools that speak directly to youth. And certainly there's African American museums. There's a network of those that I'm familiar with, but I don't think there's a great one-stop shop where you can find everything housed, unfortunately.
I have one suggestion, and this is something that's come to me later on. And I, that African American churches, are, we still are very segregated on Sunday mornings, and that is a long tradition. So, but this is music of faith that was formed of faith, and it's to me. It makes a lot of sense to me to consider African American churches as rightful recipients, and I think there could be a lot of I don't know, there's potential in that. So,
Okay, just wanted to also briefly mention that there was an option when you registered for this seminar that you could make a donation at the same time, and I'm happy to report that we've received $300 in donations, and that is going to be given to the Artist Collective in Hartford. So thanks to you who have donated, and if you would still like to, you can certainly go to the Artist Collective on their own website. I'm sure they would be happy to receive donations again, and thanks for all of the work that everybody is doing in this space. Before I wrap up, are there any other questions or comments that people would like to make? Okay. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit over an hour of your time with us. I'm hoping it was informative and you got a lot out of this. This is recorded and it will be available through our UCCMA YouTube channel. Please again check out our website for other activities that are coming up. I would like to mention especially that our next Saturday sharing session will be on March 16th, and that is going to be focused on the reality that many of our ensembles are smaller now after the pandemic, and what are people doing creatively to help make that musician still creative and be a fulfilling engagement in Sunday worship. So please join. We'll be doing a lot of people sharing some ideas. That's going to be noon on the 16th of March. Thank you so all for joining us this morning, and thanks especially to our panelists, Susan, Adam, Kimberly, and Reverend Fred. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the future.